There's a moment, you know, the one where everything goes quiet, not the good kind of quiet, not peace. The other kind, the kind where the noise of your life just stops. Where you sit alone in a room and realize you don't know what happens next. Where the plan you had, the future you imagined, the person you thought you were going to become, all of it just disappears. That was Sergio Murgina on a Tuesday night sitting on the floor of an empty apartment staring at a wall. He wasn't crying, he was past crying, he was just sitting there empty. This is the story of how he got to that floor. And more importantly, this is the story of how he got up off of it. Because here's the truth nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. Rock bottom isn't the end of the story. It's just the part right before the turn. And what happens at that turn, what you decide to say to yourself in that moment, that's the whole story. Sergio didn't have a speech ready. He didn't have a plan. All he had were 3 words. I can do this. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what those 3 words cost him. And exactly what they gave him back. Sergio didn't grow up with much. His family moved often, chasing whatever work they could find. He was the kind of kid who learned early that stability was something other people had, not something that belonged to him. Teachers labeled him distracted. Coaches labeled him not talented enough. Relatives, well-meaning as they were, labeled him realistic when they told him to lower his expectations. Get a steady job, don't dream too big, dreams are for people who can afford to fail. But there was something in Sergio, even as a kid, that refused to fully accept the label. He didn't rebel loudly. He wasn't the kid throwing tantrums or picking fights. He was quieter than that. He just kept a small, stubborn flame lit somewhere inside him, a flame that whispered, maybe they're wrong about me. That flame is the whole reason this story exists. Because most people, when they're told no enough times, start to believe it. They internalize it. The no stops being something said to them and starts being something they say to themselves. Sergio held onto that flame through his teenage years, through jobs that paid barely enough to survive, through nights where he wondered if the people who doubted him were right all along. And then in his 20s, something shifted. He got a real opportunity, the kind that comes once if you're lucky. A chance to build something of his own, a small business, nothing fancy. But it was his. For the first time in his life, Sergio Murgina felt like the flame might actually turn into a fire. He threw everything he had into it. 16-hour days, skipped meals. Missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed sleep. People around him thought he was obsessed. Maybe he was. But he had spent his whole life being told what he couldn't do, and now, finally, he had proof that he could. The business grew. Slowly at first, the kind of slow that tests your patience and makes you question every decision. Then faster. Clients started coming back. Word spread. He hired his first employee, then a second. Then a small office, then a bigger one. For the first time, Sergio wasn't just surviving, he was building. He remembers the exact day it felt real. Standing in that office, looking at a wall calendar full of meetings, full of momentum, full of a future he had built with his own 2 hands. He thought about the kid who was told to lower his expectations. He thought, I did it. I actually did it. If this were a different kind of story, it would end here. Boy overcomes odds, boy builds something great, credits roll. But real life doesn't work in 3 acts that end at the high point. Real life keeps going. And Sergio's story was about to take a turn nobody, not him, not anyone who knew him, saw coming. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel part. If it had happened all at once, maybe it would have been easier to process. One clean break, one moment to point to and say, that's when it all went wrong. Instead, it happened in pieces. A major client left, citing budget cuts. Then a second one followed. A key partnership Sergio had spent 2 years building fell apart over a disagreement that, in hindsight, could have been avoided if pride hadn't gotten in the way, his pride, and theirs. Then the economy shifted. The market he had built his entire business around started to contract. Bigger competitors moved in, undercutting prices Sergio couldn't match. He tried to adapt, tried to pivot, tried everything the business books told him to try. Nothing stuck. Within 18 months, the company that had taken him nearly a decade to build was gone. Not sold, not merged, gone, debts remained. Relationships were strained. Employees who had trusted him with their livelihoods had to be let go. A conversation Sergio describes. To this day, as the hardest of his life. Not because of what it meant for the business, but because of what it meant for the people who had believed in him. He lost the office. He lost the savings he'd built. Eventually, he lost the apartment he'd been so proud of, the one with the wall calendar full of meetings. And that's how he ended up on the floor of a nearly empty apartment on a Tuesday night, staring at a wall, past the point of crying. Sergio didn't rebuild a business empire overnight. That's not how real comebacks work, no matter what the highlight reels want you to believe. He started small, painfully, almost embarrassingly small compared to what he'd had before. He took a job, an actual job, working for someone else, something his younger, hungrier self might have seen as a step backward. But Sergio saw it differently now. It was income. It was structure. It was a way to pay down what he owed and rebuild trust, one small commitment kept at a time. He worked that job during the day. At night, he started sketching out ideas again, not because he had a grand plan, but because the part of him that used to build things was waking back up slowly, like a limb that had fallen asleep. He made mistakes. He doubted himself constantly. There were nights he sat with the same 3 words, "I can do this," and they felt more like a desperate plea than a confident statement. But he kept saying them anyway, because he'd learned something important during those dark weeks. The words don't have to feel true yet for you to keep saying them. Sometimes you say them until they become true. Slowly, the small ideas turned into small projects. The small projects turned into small clients. It was nothing like the scale of what he'd had before, not yet. But it was real, and it was his, and this time it was built on a foundation that could actually hold weight. Because it was built on someone who had already survived losing everything and chosen to stand back up anyway. The second time around looked different from the outside. Slower, quieter, less flashy. But underneath it was stronger because it wasn't running on pure hunger and pride the way the first version had. It was running on something more durable, on the lived proof that Sergio could lose everything and still find his way back. Clients started to trust him again, not because he told a good story, but because he showed up over and over in the unglamorous, unremarkable, day-to-day way that actually builds something lasting. Small wins accumulated. A second employee joined, then a third. He didn't rush it this time. He remembered what rushing had cost him. He built with margin, with patience, with humility that success alone had never taught him. And somewhere along the way, without any single dramatic turning point, Sergio Murgina realized he had done it. Not returned to exactly where he was before. That person and that business were gone, and he'd made peace with that. He had built something new, something his. Something that could survive a storm, because it had already survived one. If you're watching this and you're in your own version of that empty apartment, staring at your own version of that wall, I want you to hear this clearly. The 3 words that saved Sergio Murgina weren't magic. They didn't fix anything by themselves. What they did was buy him one more day, and then another, and then another. Enough days strung together to slowly rebuild something real. You don't need to believe, "I can do this," with full confidence for it to work. You just need to be willing to say it anyway, especially on the days it feels like a lie, especially on the days the old voices are louder than the new one. Rock bottom is real. The pain is real. Nobody is telling you to pretend it isn't. But rock bottom is also not the end of your story, it's the floor you push off from. Sergio didn't get up off that apartment floor because he suddenly had all the answers. He got up because he decided one more time to try. And then he decided it again the next day. And the day after that, that's the whole secret. It was never really a secret at all. Closing. So if today is a hard day for you, if you feel like giving up, if the voices telling you that you're not good enough feel louder than anything else, remember Sergio Murgina. Sitting on that floor, saying 3 words out loud to an empty room. "I can do this." Say it with him, not because you feel certain, because you've decided, and then get up and do the next small thing. If this story meant something to you, let me know in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, send it to them. They might be sitting on their own floor, staring at their own wall, waiting for a reason to get up. You can do this too.